So, hey everybody, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? This is Samin. I want to welcome you to the Sam I Is Show. It is Monday, and I am, as I do every day. This has become the thing. It's almost like spotting. Oh God, like spotting the Superman in the Jerry Springer episodes, Jerry Steinfeld. I just in my mind, I was like, really, Samin? That's what you want to quote? You want to quote that show? But every day I have to do something with this mic. I'm trying to sit back and get comfortable in my own home. That would be fantastic. And I've done it once before, so I'm trying to do it again. Okay, so I'm at home. It's in weather outside is getting a little bit ugly. Starting. It's rearing its head. It's kind of snowing, raining, cold. Yesterday felt like a late summer evening. Last night was pretty good, and today is a different day. But yeah, I'm getting myself settled in. I'm comfortable. It's Monday. Thank y'all for hanging out with me. I'm your boy Samin. I am the host of the Sam I Is Show. Thank you very much for hanging out with me, live and direct and live and later. I see hashtag replay, which I like. I like that too. That it all works. It all works. So today being Monday, I had a talk yesterday. And really, I talk a lot, right? But I had to talk with somebody who revisited the conversation of education again. And they really wanted me to pinpoint some things for their child, 15 or 16, black man, black father, right? Married, the whole thing. Is that like all the good things, maybe, but he wanted to know, what's good, what should he do with his son, and how do you really feel about education? So that brought up a conversation again, and I said, well, I said some things the other day. He's like, yeah, I saw it, but like, what's the real? And I said, well, I agree with a lot of that. What I said, and what I said is how I feel or my thinking around it. And I want to be a little bit more responsible, maybe a lot more responsible for the fact that everybody doesn't necessarily want the things that I wanted, right? And I'm still in that world of creating and figuring out at this age, right? The comfortable age of close to 50. I'm just going to claim close to 50. I'm closer to 50 than 40, so I'm close to 50. And I like the direction that I've done, and a lot of it was me wanting the education because I don't have the discipline to do certain things on my own. So we had a conversation, and I said, if you can create something, first of all, how old is he? He's like 16, and I know him. I feel old. I'm like, he's 16. Damn. How is he for, like, what's the goal? He wants to do film. You want to talk to me? Okay, I really have some insight into that. I've done some things as far as a degree. I've learned some techniques. I know some things. I've made a couple of films. First and Forever is like the main one that has gotten some awards. I've gotten some bags for that. It's a really above decent film. I still see lots of mistakes, and still could be a bigger film because it's about how do black men learn to be fathers being raised by mothers. And it really creates that conversation. And it ended up being light. That's a big conversation. It's a big conversation that I'm equipped to handle and take on, right? I could make that into a bigger film, make that into a project, interview some more people and do some more research. I could do that, and I haven't. And I've had some people say, you need to make it bigger. You need to make it bigger. So that's why I started telling them the same thing that I tell my students. I tell my students in the first day of school, listen, why do you want to be here? Well, I ask, why do you want to be here? Well, I want to learn how to make film. I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be this person and that person. And I said, well, okay. But you do know you can learn from YouTube, from a 16-year-old, in the comfort of your own home. All the things I'm going to teach you, right? You can do that there. So why do you want to be here? Because you want to be in person with me. Now, this is before what we're experiencing right now, where everything is online. Or so many things are online, to be more specific. And you can learn it from these people. What I offer is my experience. What I offer is hands-on. What I offer is all the work that I've done in areas. Like it never fails. It never fails. Never fails. What I have to offer is the work that I've done outside of academia and I can bring in. So anyway, without standing on the soapbox, I asked him, what is it that he wants? He wants to make films. He wants to do all this stuff. I said, well, you don't have to get a degree to do that. You don't have to get a degree to do a lot of things. You need a degree to be a lawyer and doctor. There's things, right, that are established. So while we're talking, his uncle is in the home. And we're talking, and uncle gets involved in a speaker call, and he's listening, he's talking. And he brings up something that was not the conversation my boy and I were having. And it took it perfectly to a bigger and better and greater conversation. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't smooth. It was heavy, and it was very deliberate though. And I was like, yes. So his uncle says, well, talks about student loans. You're going to end up with a bunch of student loans. I said, well, maybe you just go to a local school. Maybe he works. Maybe he goes to a local school and not think about the name, because nobody asks you the name. Nobody says, what school did you graduate from? The only people who talk about the schools they graduated from are people who go into schools that are like well-known, right? Like Princeton or a Yale or Harvard or Howard or Hampton, like those type of schools that the name has more of a legend to it than the actual academic, right? The academics. Just the name of it, because you also form like a brotherhood or sisterhood or community based on having gone to the same school and it being one of those type of things, right? So I said, well, let's go local. Your degree is your degree. You could go local. Well, degrees ain't worth nothing. I can't argue that, right? I can't argue that I've been in situations where my degree, that piece of paper, didn't give me anything, but I also have done things and been connected to situations that I could not be involved in had I not had that degree. Like, it was a conversation that no one who doesn't have this MFA can even be in this conversation. Now, are there many of those conversations? No, there are a few though. I've been in a few. So you're sitting here in a room full of people who are all at zero, with the exception of having this degree. But now you all are zero. And now you got to work up and figure out and hustle to show your worth. Right. So there's that. And so he was like, well, back in my day, now he's like 60 something. Back in my day, I love to hear it because I don't have a connection to a back in my day. I have my back in my day. But when I hear black men speak about back in my day, I don't have a connection to black men who can paint a picture of a history of a time that I know nothing about, right? Because for me, Earth started the day I was born, and that's fact. But I don't know what Harlem was like, or Cleveland, or any place that was like. He's 60 something, so let's just say he's like 68, so 70 from the 2020 would take him back to being born around 1950. That's a different time, right? That's a different time. It's not 1850, but it's 1950. And it's like, what was life like then for a black man, right? What was life like then for a black community? So now I'm all ears because I want to hear what he has to say. Because although he's rough, right? He's rough. I'm good. I'm good with rough. I come from rough. Trust me. As long as you don't put your hands on me, which is not going to happen, because first of all, it's not going to happen. And second of all, you're on your speakerphone somewhere else. So he's saying back in my day, we had schools that offered training. that was something. So I was like, okay, yeah, I get that. Because I also believe that, but they don't exist that I know of. I remember Apex Tech and I think Job Corps, where you could go away and learn a skill, right? Because at the end of the day, what is the real goal of a human being? And I'm speaking of the three black men that were having this conversation. My boy started to drift off. He I guess, I don't know what it was. I don't know if he was tired of hearing his uncle or he just fell back and let the uncle and I really have this conversation. Although he was still there, but he had little to nothing to offer, which was fine. So he's going in and we're talking, and he's saying back in his day they offered trade school, so he learned how to work on cars. And I was like, oh, okay, well that's what's up. And from him learning on cars, he learned how to work on like furnaces, air conditioners, like a technical skill base. And then it wasn't so much about education. Education came much later. Now, there's something very powerful about that conversation, because it's like, yeah, that's true. Because you actually have a skill that's useful that there's no situation to which you can't go and earn money, which is one of my things. Is like a degree does not equal money. It doesn't equal money. It might give you self-esteem. It might give you some skills and some lessons that you know, and a subject that you master. It could even provide a career, but it doesn't necessarily equal braces, shoelaces, Catholic school, private school, Cardinal. It does not equal that, right? But what it does equal is not in that conversation. It's not in that conversation. And the mistake that comes up, and this is where, I'm listening to him and I say, well, that's fantastic. And he's really breaking it down. And now education is it's a waste of time. And I'm like, well, I can't agree with that. And I'm not disagreeing. So it's like that strange space of, because it can't provide for your family. And that was his point. It can't provide for your family. And I said, well, this is not necessarily about providing for your family. And that's what brought up the middle-class bourgeoisie. And that was with the Dada, and the whole rebellion was based on the middle-class bourgeoisie, who were the people who had wealth or financial comfort, so much so that they could learn about art and they could learn about travel and they could do these things that create a space of seemingly knowledge of the world, right? Of the world, which is something I'm interested in, not to be the middle-class bourgeoisie or anything like that, but the idea of learning about the world is fantastic to me. Because if not, then it becomes me on the block that I grew up in and dying within 20 blocks of where I was born, which I've seen, like literally my mother died 30 blocks away from where her childhood, and not even 30 blocks, right? Not even, she grew up down on Lenox. I'm doing like this, like I'm in Harlem. And she died on Riverside. So, but it was the same. She was in 155th and she died on 141st. And that was really her level of travel in the world. That was it. That was where, and that's common. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want to do, if that's the life you want to live. Now, I'm not saying she never left and never traveled to a place or never, she did some of that. That wasn't something that she created as a conversation of anything that was important, though, right? She did some things because she had to do some things in other states. And I won't take her inventory on that. But she did that. But she died in that same cube of where she was born. That's very common. So I don't want that. I've moved and I traveled around, and it was hard for me to get out of that bubble. So I'm not going to go into that, but so he was sharing. So we would go back and he would say, well, that's true. But this whole thing about education, and now he's talking about getting his son. Now he's thinking about his nephew and his grandnephew. Now he's thinking about who is that? Hold on. They banging on my door like the police. That was the police. Did y'all hear that? They was banging on my door like the police. So anyway, that was a delivery. Must be of some value because they want me to acknowledge that it was delivered. But I didn't have to sign for it, so excuse that. It's live. This is what's happening. So he was, in the space of now he's talking about his nephew, and now his nephew thinking about school and thinking about going into debt. I'm like, well, you don't have to go into debt. He can actually work through it. But he doesn't even have to do that. He could start doing the things that we're talking about before he goes to school. So possibly he doesn't even have to go to school for it. He can learn and read books and actually become self-taught. So what's the discipline like? So I started to really focus on the discipline. Like, how good is he with discipline? Because that's important. Because going to the university is about discipline. I was not disciplined. I struggled. I struggled. And I needed help and I needed meds. That doesn't necessarily have to happen for everybody, but because my scheduling, due dates, things like that are difficult if you don't take them on in a serious way. You know what I'm saying? So that doesn't necessarily work. So we continue to talk. He was really rough, and then he started to calm down a little bit, and then he brought some other stuff up. And I think he was rough, trying to fill me out like an old dude, like, let's see where your head is at. So we having this talk, and I'm dancing with him because I know what I know, and I believe in the things that I say, and I'm always open to be wrong and taught something different. So I could take it and be like, oh, well, let me go and look at that, and let me look this up, and I have some things to look up. He was like, yeah, so that was in the 50s and 60s. They offered these things in the schools, 60s and 70s. He said, and then drugs came in. I don't know what happened. I was, and the time is actually still ticking. I got locked out. I got I got locked out. Oh man. Well, I don't even know where I was. I don't know where I was, but oh yeah, I think I do. I'm gonna try to bring it back. There'll be an edit. I will edit this because I've been locked out. They were like, "Nah, son, you wanna walk away?" Yeah, like, yeah, you want to walk away and go answer the door. So this is what it is now. This is what the deal is. So I'm dealing with that. I'm dealing with that. So I'm back on right now. And I was talking about him saying the 70s. And I'm not sure what just happened. I don't know why I got locked out. I think when I came back to sit down, the internet is behind me, so it knocked something out. It disconnected because I do have right back here, back this way behind me there is like the modem, the two modems, and all the stuff is behind me, neatly packaged away. So it he started to speak about drugs coming in the 80s, like 70s and 80s, but really the 80s. And he started breaking down the presidency and how things happened that took some of this stuff away. And his approach and what he was saying, I don't know anything about this, and it makes so much sense. It was what do you call it, like hideous, beautiful, hideous. It was like beautiful to get this information from him, and heartbreaking though to hear it. It was like, wait, what? So how he has it is that how he experienced it. I don't want to make it like I don't believe it. I believe all of it. But they would teach black men, because mostly black men were doing this, right? This is the 50s and 60s. Still a lot of, women stay home, no women's rights. That's still under that's still up for negotiation, right? Even to today. But then the drugs come in. So they have this technical thing, and these black men are still doing what we do, right? But still staying in the home and being a primary income and living within their means, and they can function and they can provide and pay for things. Now, this is after, I think he said after Martin Luther King was killed, and he would give the dates. I don't know the exact date, 68 maybe, that there was an agenda of blackness that was there. Right. So like I said, the conversation is not about education anymore in the structure and the form of going to a university. But now I'm getting a different kind of education, and I'm listening to him, and he's just running it off. And he's like, and he's asking me like, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? And I don't, but I'm with him. I'm like, yeah, I got you. That's my thing. I got you. I understand what you're saying. But I wasn't alive when that happened, and I don't really know enough history. And he's there, like I was there, this is what it was. So I'm like, okay. He starts to tell me about after Martin Luther King, and that was probably one of, not the biggest people, but that time of the black civil rights, the push has never hit that as anything important again since he was killed. Like, we've never hit the heights of talking about the civil rights of black Americans, have never hit that the pinnacle since he was killed, right? And then after that, they got rid of, over time, and he was saying this is the government. They got rid of the funding for technical, like teaching these men to be technical with their hands. And I could sit there and say, well, I know that in my time, they have gotten rid of certain programs for children, right? Like the physical ed, the gym is one. Some schools have gyms, some schools don't. Some schools have physical fitness and things like that, and some don't. So I'm like, okay, I could connect that to, he's speaking something that I'm looking to make it make sense in my world. And then he says, well, and then the drugs come in. And I'm like, well, drugs. He was like, yeah, no, drugs. And do you believe that America can't stop the drugs from coming in? They didn't come in everywhere. So now he's spitting that stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's true. They didn't come in everywhere. They went into certain areas and environments intentionally. And when you're dealing with lack of employment, because blacks don't have hiring or firing power. So I'm loving it, right? I'm like, yo, I never even thought about that. He was like, yeah, it's not. How can it be our issue? We don't have the power to hire and fire. We don't have a history of doing that. We get hired or we get fired. And we're always wanting to not get either of those, right? We don't want to get hired. I don't want to get fired. I mean, I don't not either of those. We don't want to be fired, but we don't really have the power. And stop me before I said, but well, he was like, and I'm not talking about the few. The few. There are few black-owned companies. There are few that are all independent. There are few, but look at the masses. And he started to break down like China, Chinatown, China in America, the Italians, and like all over. Like he's been waiting to have this conversation. And I was like, I'm waiting to hear it. But the stuff he was saying was like, I got uncomfortable because what he was creating, and I'm going to do a terrible job of recreating what he said, right? Because he has it. I'm just rebounding or repeating some of the things that I remember that he said. And of course I'm skipping over stuff, but it was just so incredible. And he kept going. He was like, and then it was the 80s with this one. And then it was the Bush. And then it was the 90s and Clinton with the 3 strikes. And that's coming into law and order, right? So we talk a little bit about law and order. And he's like, so you get rid of teaching these black men the skills that they need to like survive and stay in a family. Now you're putting them in prison. You're giving them drugs. They're getting high or they're selling drugs because they can't get jobs, right? So they're using drugs, so they become useless. It's a space for like drug addiction. I've experienced it on both sides. I've experienced it as a child, seeing a family in a household shredded with drug addiction, and I've been addicted to drugs, weed. So, but I've been addicted though. I was. That's not a state that I want to be in today. But so I understand what he's saying. He's like, so now you're selling drugs, you're using drugs. Heroin is what he's speaking about. Heroin, cocaine. Cocaine was more of a luxury drug, but he's like, when he's talking addiction, he's talking about heroin in that time. And then you start smoking it, selling some coke, selling some drugs, and now you're going to prison for wild football numbers, right? And then crack comes, and he's breaking this down. It's so beautiful. It's like crack and crack hits. Crack is telling. I know crack. I've experienced what that's like to be in a world where crack was tearing communities apart. He said so, and then now you're selling it because you can make some money doing it, and now you're going to jail for 50 years, and somebody else might be going to jail for 4 months for selling cocaine. And he broke that down, and then he got up and he got into the politics and what becomes important for presidents to talk about. Then we have Obama. And he says, well, I'm like, well, we got Obama. He's like, yeah, Obama was great for self-esteem, which is what I say. At the end of the day, he was great for self-esteem. It was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. He's fantastic. Didn't really do a lot. And the argument is he couldn't do a lot. Yeah, that's all true. But he didn't also, and he still didn't do a lot, right? Like too much. He didn't. But then there was a new agenda. And the new agenda was the LBT, right? LGBT. Let me be responsible. And I know they've added some stuff, but I'm going to stop with that. Became the agenda for the president to handle. That became the thing. Now, and it couldn't be anything else. Because if in my mind, I'm thinking this is the time, but I know better because he can't address black issues being a black president because he's on the spotlight. So we're talking about that. And he was like, exactly. And I'm like, I got that. He's like, there's nothing else he could have done. He did the best he could do. Nothing else he could do. But there was a new agenda. Remember, there was, after Martin Luther King was killed, the agenda hasn't actually come up where Black Americans have been important, and the issues that we endure have become important. So we're sitting with that, and then he says, and our president now, as soon as he got in, he said it was the woman, the pussy hats is what he said. He was like, yeah, then it's the woman, and that became the new issue. So it's always going to be another issue that people take notice of that, again, doesn't handle some of the real issues in America at its core. And that was my education today. And he was like, so with all of this, I just don't went back to the loan. I just don't want him to end up with a bunch of student loans. And I was like, he doesn't have to. He can go he doesn't even have to go to school, but he can and be prepared and work through school. People work through school all the time. The idea of having debt with school is unnecessary, right? And I know the debt that I endured was me needing this much, but me taking this much, double what I needed, 3 times what I needed, and then having to pay that back because it's free money and it's never free, right? And it brought up in my mind, like, to get rid of these technical schools where you could actually learn the skills. But he gave me in an hour a breakdown of how how it's been intentional, the destruction of Black family, how he sees it, the destruction of Black family, the destruction of men, Black men, the destruction of a young Black boy. He just broke it down, and it was just like, wow, okay. And he wasn't angry, and it didn't sound crazy. It just was like, oh, I never thought about the things that you're saying being so intentional, right? Being very intentional. So that was my talk about education. Again, the revisiting of education, and how it's very intentional to state the space that we're in, and how there's questions to be asked. So what I walked away with was, there's more questions to ask about where do you see what you're going to do being useful in your life if you don't get hired. Like, if are you a business person? Can you create? Do you have friends and you all could go into something together? What is it? And but I couldn't ignore the fact that this is a lot. There's been some intention on breaking things down, and then of course he went into like, and look at us. Look at us. Look at us. We battle each other. We're worthless, and I'm like, okay, we're worthless, and we got to wear everything on us to prove our worth. And then it was like the drop mic a little bit, and it was time to go. My boy was like, all right. But it was brilliant to have that conversation with someone who experienced that timeline in person and felt some way about it, and felt some way about the loss, and felt some way about where we are and where we're going. So that was my Sunday after 7. After I didn't share that. I didn't even think about it, right? But anyway, thank you. 7. I'm not even sure when that was. I don't know the time. Anyway, thank y'all for hanging out with me. I'm still a little thrown off by my by what happened. I got to figure out now. I got to edit this. Now I got to download it, and I'm already in it right here. My face is like, what was that? 10 minutes? 10 minutes of like blank space that I got to chop up. But anyway, I'll get it fixed up. I'll get it figured out. Thank you for hanging out with me. Love your daughters. Love your daughters. There's some intentionality about beating up on a Black man. It's just not even funny. It's like, oh, that's not cool. We got enough issues. I don't need a government intention. I don't need a person pointing out where a government has intentionally done things to 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 break to break up my family, to break up my existence, because I come from broken family, and to think that we're just the pawns, right, in this game that a group of people actually literally thought out is confronting. That's confronting to me, to think that there's some powers together that are sitting there like, you know what we should do? We should get rid of that schooling so that they can't work. Really? And you know what we should do? We should let the drugs in. Really? And then you know what we should do? We should go and arrest all of them and give them more time than these people time. And you know what we should do? We should put them in jail after 3 mistakes. We should put them in jail for life. And you know what we should, I mean, and then there's a space of, why wouldn't that be the case? Like, who wrote and created the Constitution? Like the amendments, who were the people that created those doctrines, right? Those documents, who were the people, and what were the people that they were speaking about at that time? And when I sit with that, it has the opportunity to really, I get a little sad, right? Like, oh, but I get sad because it's almost getting sad. Like when I got to clean out my car, it's like, it needs to happen. There's work to be done, and no one else can clean my car. Like no one else. I have to clean it, and I'm clear that there's some things going on. And I could sit back and wait and watch, but it's not a lot of traction happening. So in that space, I start to sit. I'm like, now you got to learn some stuff. And now you got to, enlighten. And now you got to go and do something. Now you got to do something. Because knowing is just knowing. But now that's the dread for me. Like, think I got time to do something to change the situation that we're in? And it's like, well, no, then keep shutting up and let it happen. The dread is in the world of acknowledging that in this, there's something, and I don't know what it is, that I can do to alter this. If I alter just a little bit and I encourage one person to alter, and then that starts to happen, then perhaps we start looking at the world from a little bit different. And I'm going somewhere else. This is another podcast. I'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow. Thank y'all for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it. Love, love, love your daughters. Take care of your sons. There is a war going on outside no man is safe from. That just came to me. That is Mobb Deep. Rest in peace, Prodigy. Peace.